Have you ever wondered if the universe is truly as predictable as we think? What if beneath all the math, the textbooks, and the physical laws we trust, there's something waiting to defy us, something that makes us question everything we know? On March 4th, 2026, a quiet suspicion turned into something undeniable when the James Webb Space Telescope sent back data that changed everything. This wasn't just some strange observation or a minor glitch in the instruments. No, what came through was something that challenged the very core of our understanding of physics, and it was all centered around a comet named 3A Atlas. This comet, which scientists thought was nearing the end of its life, defied everything they knew about comets. You see, comets are fragile relics of the early solar system. As they approach the sun, they break apart, shedding mass in luminous trails of gas and dust. This is the predictable, almost poetic end to their journey. But 3A Atlas decided to follow its own path. According to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, within a mere 18-minute window, this comet did something that no one expected. Instead of continuing its decay, it reversed it. The disintegration stopped, the fragmentation ceased, and the comet started pulling itself back together. The laws of thermodynamics, the very foundation of physics, told us that this shouldn't be possible. Yet, there it was, right before our eyes. Imagine that. A comet, normally decaying under the intense heat of the sun, actually healing itself, becoming younger instead of aging and breaking apart. This wasn't a simple anomaly or a software glitch. It was a direct violation of the second law of thermodynamics, which governs entropy, the natural tendency for things to break down and disorder to increase over time. This was something that should not happen in the vast expanse of space. Yet it did. The comet was pulling material back toward itself, reassembling instead of disintegrating. It was no longer just a comet in our solar system. It had become an unsolvable puzzle, a cosmic enigma. And that's where this story stops being just a scientific observation and becomes something far more profound. Because as scientists began to dig deeper into the data, things got even stranger. It wasn't just that the comet reversed its decay. The timeline of events was becoming more bizarre by the hour. On February 12, 2026, 3 days before anyone even knew anything was off, the James Webb Space Telescope conducted a routine spectroscopic analysis of 3A Atlas as it drifted closer to the inner solar system. Nothing unusual was expected. The models predicted a typical cometary display, sublimating water vapor, carbon monoxide jets, and dust plumes. But what the instruments picked up was nothing like that. The comet's gas cloud, its coma, was not expanding as it should. It was contracting, shrinking by an unbelievable 63% in just 4 hours. This wasn't random noise or some fluke. It was as if the comet itself was pulling material inward, actively defying everything scientists knew about how comets behave. The question then became, where did the material go? In the vacuum of space, gas and dust don't just disappear. They disperse, they drift outward. But 3A Atlas wasn't doing that. Instead, it was pulling everything back in. Spectral Doppler analysis showed that the gas and dust were accelerating inward at speeds faster than what would be expected from gravitational pull alone. Independent observatories, including the JWST, the European Space Agency's telescopes, and ALMA in Chile, all confirmed the same thing. The comet was actively reassembling itself. And then came the next shock ice. When comets approach the sun, their surface ice typically sublimates, turning directly into gas as it is exposed to the sun's heat. This is standard thermodynamic behavior. But what the James Webb Space Telescope found on 3A Atlas wasn't sublimation. It was crystallization. The ice was forming into cubic structures, not the random frost that is usually seen on comets. Cubic ice forms under very specific temperature and pressure conditions that shouldn't exist as the comet neared the Sunday, but that's not all. The temperature readings showed something even more bizarre: localized cooling. Regions of the comet's surface were cooling down by nearly 140 degrees Fahrenheit, contrary to what should have been happening in the intense heat of the Sunday. In these specific areas, crystallization was occurring, but instead of heating up, these regions were cooling down. The comet wasn't just acting oddly, it was actively managing its own thermal energy. Think about that for a moment. A comet, which should have been heating up as it approached the sun, was cooling itself in exact strategic patches. This wasn't random, it was organized, and it was happening at the same time as the ice was crystallizing in an ordered geometric pattern. Scientists were left wondering, how could this be happening? What kind of forces were at work here? This wasn't just an odd coincidence. This was a celestial object seemingly managing its own energy, cooling itself down at specific locations, all while pulling material back into itself. But that wasn't the end of the story. No, as more data came in, it became clear that 3A Atlas was doing something even more strange, something that made the entire scientific community pause and reconsider everything they knew about comets. Stay tuned as we continue to dive into this mystery, because what happens next is about to shatter everything we thought we knew about the universe. The story of 3A Atlas doesn't just end with these bizarre findings. As the data continued to pour in, scientists discovered something that would forever change their understanding of space objects. The comet, which was supposed to be dying, was not only healing itself, but also emitting a coherent and structured electromagnetic signal. This was something no one expected, especially from a comet that should have been on its way out. It wasn't background noise or interference. This was a stable, repeating signal locked to the comet's rotational period, emerging at 1.42 GHz, a frequency associated with the hydrogen line, an area of the radio spectrum often used in interstellar communication. The signal was not only present, but it was also precisely timed, every 23 seconds, like a clock ticking in the vast emptiness of space. What made this so significant? For decades, the scientific community has assumed that any intelligent extraterrestrial civilization would use the hydrogen line for communication. It's one of the most recognizable frequencies in the universe, and it has been the focus of SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, research for years. And yet here we were, receiving a signal from a comet that was supposed to be nothing more than a fragile relic of the early solar system. How could this be happening? Why was this comet emitting a signal at this specific frequency? And what's even more unsettling is that the signal was not random or chaotic. No, the pattern of the signal was structured. When scientists analyzed the pulses, they noticed something extraordinary. The signal was not just a simple tone, it was transmitting prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. These numbers, which are the foundation of mathematics, have been recognized as a universal constant that any intelligent species would understand. They are the building blocks of arithmetic, the first numbers that any civilization capable of counting would come across. And here, they were embedded in a signal coming from a comet. This was no ordinary celestial object. This was something else entirely. A comet, which was supposed to be a dying piece of space debris, was now sending us a message, one that was mathematically structured, purposeful, and deliberate. But the anomalies didn't stop there. As the signal continued to emit, the comet itself began to behave in even stranger ways. The signal wasn't just a passive broadcast, it was directional. The beam was aimed directly at Earth, and it remained locked on our planet. And here's the real kicker. The comet's rotational axis had shifted by 0.4 degrees, a tiny adjustment that is monumental in celestial mechanics. This is not something that a passive object like a comet would do on its own. For a comet to make such a change, it would need some kind of external force or internal mechanism, neither of which were present. What we were witnessing was a comet that seemed to be actively targeting Earth. It wasn't just emitting a signal, it was aimed directly at us. And it wasn't just about the signal anymore. The comet was undergoing an unprecedented transformation. It was healing itself, pulling material back into its core, cooling itself down, and now it was communicating with us in a way that defied all natural explanations. Could it be that we were witnessing the activity of a highly advanced intelligence? As the days passed, the situation became even more intriguing. The signal was no longer just a curious anomaly. It was becoming increasingly clear that this comet, 3A Atlas, was doing something far more deliberate. As it moved closer to the Sun, the intensity of the signal increased, and not in a random way. The signal's strength seemed to be directly correlated with the amount of solar radiation the comet was receiving. The closer it got to the Sun, the stronger the transmission became. This suggested something truly extraordinary. The comet was harvesting solar energy instead of simply absorbing the Sun's energy and emitting it through sublimation. It appeared to be converting this energy into coherent electromagnetic output. This is a process known as energy conversion, and it's something we associate with sophisticated technology, not natural phenomena. The idea that a comet could harvest energy from the Sun and use it to amplify its signal was something that, until now, was unthinkable. Comets are supposed to be fragile objects, not complex machines. And yet, here we were, watching as 3A Atlas seemed to be using the Sun's energy to power itself and send out a message. What was this message, though, and why now? Why was this comet, which had been thought to be just another piece of space debris, suddenly behaving like an active participant in a larger plan? Some scientists began to suggest that we might be looking at something far more profound than just a comet. What if 3A Atlas wasn't a natural object at all? What if it was something else entirely, a device, a probe, a piece of ancient technology? Could it be that this comet, this seemingly random object, was actually an artifact, activated by the Sun's proximity and aimed directly at us? As the comet approached the orbit of Mars, the question loomed larger than ever. Was this a random sequence of events, or was 3A Atlas sending us a message? The next few days would reveal more information, but one thing was certain: this wasn't just about the laws of thermodynamics anymore. We were witnessing something far bigger, something that could change everything we thought we knew about the universe. As 3A Atlas drew closer to Mars, scientists raced against time to analyze the data. The comet's behavior was unlike anything they had encountered before. The reformation process, which had begun a few days earlier, was accelerating. In fact, the comet was growing in size and mass. After the first 24 hours of reversing its decay, it was already regaining material at a rate of 2 tons per second. By the second day, it was up to 8 tons per second. And within 48 hours, the rate had skyrocketed to an astonishing 30 tons per second. This wasn't a gradual process. It was happening in a burst of activity that suggested something more than just a comet with unusual properties. The rate of material reacquisition was not just fast, it was accelerating. Systems don't behave like this unless they are being actively controlled. It was clear that 3A Atlas wasn't just a passive object in space. It was responding to its environment, adapting and healing at a pace that was becoming impossible to ignore. The strange thermal anomalies, the cooling in specific areas of the comet, the crystallization of ice, where there should have been only sublimation, all of these factors pointed to something far beyond the ordinary behavior of a comet. At the same time, the electromagnetic signal continued to pulse, but it wasn't just getting stronger, it was becoming more focused, more directional. Scientists had now confirmed that the signal was being emitted in a beam aimed directly at Earth. The modulation pattern, which had initially been a regular 2-3 second pulse, was now shifting. The intervals between the pulses were lengthening slightly by microseconds at first, then gradually increasing. This suggested a level of sophistication that no natural object could possibly achieve. The pattern wasn't random, it wasn't the result of a chaotic cosmic event. It was a deliberate, structured signal, and it was aimed at us. What was the comet trying to communicate? Was it simply an anomaly in space? Or was it something much more significant? The more scientists looked at the data, the more they found themselves grappling with the possibility that 3A Atlas wasn't just a comet at all. It might be a device, a sentient machine, or even a probe sent to gather data or communicate with other civilizations. The sheer complexity of its behavior, its ability to reverse entropy, its directed signal, its geometric crystallization seemed to point to something far beyond the capabilities of any natural object in our solar system. And if it was a probe, what was its purpose? What message was it trying to deliver? And who or what had sent it? As the comet approached Mars' orbit, the urgency to understand what was happening intensified. The data being collected by the independent observatories was no longer just a curiosity. It was something that demanded immediate answers. For the first time in human history, we were faced with a potential encounter with something that could fundamentally alter our understanding of physics, communication, and even the possibility of extraterrestrial life. The idea that 3A Atlas might be a probe, an ancient piece of technology, rather than a natural comet, began to gain traction within the scientific community. It wasn't just the signal or the way the comet was healing itself. It was the fact that the comet's rotation was being actively adjusted. This wasn't some random celestial object drifting through space. The comet was actively targeting Earth, maintaining a signal that was becoming stronger the closer it got to the sunday. The energy harvesting aspect of this comet was becoming increasingly clear. The comet was absorbing solar radiation and converting it into a coherent electromagnetic output. This was a process that, until now, had only been associated with advanced technology, not natural celestial bodies. As the signal strength increased, so did the questions surrounding its source. How could a comet, which was supposedly just a fragment of the early solar system, be emitting a signal so precisely aimed at Earth? Why was it that the closer the comet got to the sun, the stronger the signal became? And why was the signal repeating prime numbers, an unmistakable sign of intelligence? These questions weren't just theoretical anymore. They were becoming a pressing issue that needed to be addressed. Was 3A Atlas an ancient probe? Was it a piece of technology designed to communicate with intelligent life? If so, who or what had sent it? One thing was certain. This was no longer just a scientific anomaly. The behavior of the comet had moved beyond the realm of natural phenomena and entered a domain that was eerily reminiscent of a communication system, an intelligence sending a message across the vastness of space. The only question left was whether we were capable of understanding it. As scientists around the world scrambled to piece together the implications of the data, there was one undeniable conclusion. The universe had just thrown us a curveball, and we weren't sure whether it was a friendly gesture or a warning. If 3A Atlas was a natural object, then the laws of thermodynamics and celestial mechanics were far more flexible than anyone had imagined. If it wasn't natural, then the message was even more profound. It meant that humanity had just witnessed the first verified instance of extraterrestrial engineering. As the comet continued its journey through the solar system and its signal grew stronger, one thing became clear. 3A Atlas was not just an oddball comet, it was an active, purposeful object. The adjustment in its rotation, the specific cooling patterns, the crystalline ice forming in geometric patterns, it all suggested that there was more at play here than simple physical processes. If the comet was an ancient artifact, it was a highly sophisticated one. It was a machine, a probe, or something else, entirely something capable of harnessing solar energy, communicating across vast distances, and possibly even manipulating the very laws of physics. As the comet crossed the orbit of Mars and continued its path toward Earth, the scientific community held its breath. Every new piece of data that came in only deepened the mystery. The signal was no longer just an oddity. It was a pattern, and that pattern was undeniable. The prime numbers, the precise intervals, the directionality of the signal, it all pointed to something deliberate, something that couldn't be explained away by simple physics or random cosmic events. In the coming days, as new observations were made and the comet moved closer to Earth, we would finally have the answers. Would the signal persist, or would it fade? Would the comet continue to reassemble itself, or would it finally break apart? And, most importantly, what message was 3A Atlas trying to send? Was it simply a natural phenomenon that had evolved in a way we couldn't yet comprehend, or was it an ancient device sent to communicate with us? The answers might not come easily, but one thing is certain. The universe just threw us a puzzle we can't ignore. And as we wait for the data to come in, one final question lingers in the air. Are we ready for what we're about to discover? Whatever it is, we'll be watching closely. And in the end, when the truth finally reveals itself, will we be prepared to understand the message the universe has been trying to send us all along? If you're fascinated by the mysteries of the universe and want to stay up to date on the latest discoveries, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Leave your thoughts and theories about 3A Atlas in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on what's really happening out there. Thanks for watching, and remember, the universe has a way of revealing its secrets when we least expect it. Stay curious.